This is the second part of a two-part discussion on Chuck Schuldiner's final two albums, focusing primarily on their lyrics and the themes and concepts they evoke. Please see the first part for the general introduction and for the first album. The fragile art of existence opens with a song that is as twisted as it is contradictory. One could read it as a song about romantic love, and there are several indicators of this. But one can take a step deeper and see that romantic love as such can be a sign of something more fundamental. Perhaps all-consuming immersion spells out something about the manner consciousness comports itself and projects itself into the world, and particularly into other people. After the melodic and very progressive intro, the opening lines read, "Your face is hiding deep inside my mind. Your touch is on my tongue. Your face is the deepest depths of my eyes, the eyes inside my soul." The focus of the projection is the face of the other. Additionally, there is a nice play of the words I and I at the end of the first verse. In his Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel speaks of how self-consciousness as desire develops into acknowledgement, commonly translated as recognition, attempting to overcome the frustrations of desire by seeking a higher purpose and being recognized as essential by another self-consciousness. In this way, the other self-consciousness becomes a mirror for this one. As Hegel writes, self-consciousness is in and for itself, while, as a result of it being in and for itself for another, in other words, it is only as a recognized being. The concept of its unity in its doubling, of infinity realizing self in self-consciousness, is that of a multi-sided and multi-meaning intertwining, such that, on the one hand, the moments within this intertwining must be strictly kept apart from each other, and, on the other hand, they must also be taken and cognized at the same time as not distinguished, or they must always be taken and cognized in their opposite meanings. This twofold sense of what is distinguished lies in the essence of self-consciousness, which is to be infinitely or immediately the opposite of the determinateness in which it is posited. For self-consciousness there is another self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is outside itself. Self-consciousness, according to Hegel, develops into a doubling duality where, on the one hand, it loses itself in another, but, on the other hand, the other in which it loses itself is not so much an other as it sees or acknowledges precisely itself in this other. Self-consciousness is thus bound to another through which it finds its own sense of self. As the lyrics of the song continue, "Once I was free, but now I am trapped. Once I was trapped, but now I am free." Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It is the ability to put oneself in another's position. For Hegel, self-consciousness is fundamentally empathetic because it simply cannot be fully itself without this ability to project itself in another and acknowledge itself therein. This other, however, must itself be a self-consciousness. But notice how, in order for this first self-consciousness to acknowledge itself in another, this other has to be oriented in such a way as to let this happen, and thus to be a mirror for the other. This requires, however, an act of self-negation. It means giving up the certainty of one's own self in favor of the being certain of the other in their own right. In Hegel's account, self-consciousness is unable to do this because it is motivated by its own essence. We might say it is guided by consuming, which then leads into a struggle to the death. In the song in question, we seem to look not at the consumer, but the consumed. I taste the tears you bled. I felt the fears you shed. You thought I did not feel. You thought I could not taste. If we recall the play on words I and I at the end of the first verse, we can posit that the I in this verse is one of many I's inside the soul. Normally, the I and soul are made simply identical, as a synonym for the same atomic, indivisible psyche. This brings me to the twist I wanted to put forward here. Using a heterodox view of Hegel's account of self-consciousness, namely that it is not actually the relation of one self-conscious person to another, but of one self-consciousness relating to itself through a logical doubling of itself, whereby it sees another only through the mirroring of that other as itself. This is fundamental empathy. Do you feel the pain that I feel? The pain that lives inside? Do you wear the chains that I wear, the ones that rob me raw? There is a line of skepticism running through the framework of the song. Although we have this romantic longing and self-conscious doubling, effectively these two speak for the same here, there is a prevailing counteracting voice that asks questions and suspends belief and presuppositions. Every time it is the same three words, every time the number speaks, and when you see me and you think I am there, you will know that it is just a dream. The same three words here must mean I love you, and the number speaking could refer to the banality of rejection, that is, how rejection simply renders the situation common and able to be counted instead of being existentially unique. It removes the immersion and replaces it with a deposit on the balance sheet of mechanical memory. The skeptical voice seems to declare a resolution. However, that seeing and thinking that the mirrored self-consciousness is there leads only to the acknowledgement of its mere seeming. You will know that it is just a dream. Dreams play a crucial role in Schuldiner's lyrics of both this and the previous album, but usually they signify something healthy and strong. Yet here we encounter dreams as something hopeless, as something lacking reality. This notion can be traced back to William Blake's fourfold division of being: Ulro, Generation, Beulah, and Eden. Here Beulah is the realm of inspiration and dreams, and it stands as the second most real being in Blake's system, falling short of the true fountain of reality, which is Eden. The literary critic Northrop Frye calls Beulah the realm of frustrated sexual desire. Perhaps seeing the mirror and not falling prey to its image, but knowing that the reflection is just a dream, can be a moment of clarity. This would then lead to a positive resolution, but the song's ending suggests that the mere knowing, mere clarity, is not sufficient to dispel the effect of the dream's image. Consumed, escape through dreams. Consumed, trapped by dreams. Consumed, forever, it seems. The Perseverance album had at its base the flesh and its power, surrounded by violent and kinetic themes. And remember also that the word consumed was used there particularly regarding the body. Nevertheless, that album ended with something distinctly mental in its element. Here, in the fragile art of existence, we take a step further and see that mere clarity can trap us in an endless hallway of dreams. While something more is needed, what has been achieved in the development turns now out to have been necessary, namely that to be consumed is hereby necessary. Thus, the entry to the album demands the absolute. It is not enough to feel delight, to be moved, or to have one's curiosity piqued, but a damning sense of being consumed, bent towards something or someone, destined to face one's freedom. The second song of the album deals with incapacity and lack of control. It does appear to be a song that speaks only about the negative side of weakness, especially given its bleak title, but it could offer some positive way forward, and I will try to illustrate this possibility. Let us then look at the opening verse. I saw you, you saw me, you hid your fangs so well. I should have known better, but it is hard to tell. In beauty the evil is waiting for possession. Deep inside, reflections, just a glimpse away. Both parties lay themselves open, but one is enamored by the other's beauty, which seem to hide the fangs of the other. The line that says evil is waiting for possession in beauty is a horrific idea because it rings pragmatically true. If we grant that nobody actively wants to do evil, yet things happen that are so dreadful that we cannot but label them as evil, how can it be possible for evil to exist? The philosopher Collingwood argues that pure evil does not exist because it does not have any actuality of its own. Evil is rather a privation of good. However, evil is not merely relative either, since evil really is something destructive, denigrating, and harmful. He spells out how a coherent notion of evil must avoid two types of error. One, asserting that because evil, error, and the like have actual existence in the world of experience, they are not negative but positive, standing to good, truth, etc., in a relation not of opposition, but of mere distinction. The other, asserting that because they are the negation of those positive terms, they have no actuality, and that nothing evil exists. Let us take food as an example. Food is necessary and good. It gives us sensuous delight. Yet, because of how our brains are wired for sugar, fats, and carbs, we can get hooked on eating far more than needed, and so food, instead of being beneficial, becomes something harmful. And it becomes harmful precisely because it begins to contest the other types of goods: health, self-esteem, strength, and so forth. Returning now to the lyrics, we can get now the sense whereby something positive can turn negative, and that the negative is not simply negative as such, but the inhibition of other positives. Your faithful servants, they bow to you. Together they're breaking the broken. What are we to make of these lines? Who are the faithful servants bowing to? What does it mean to break the broken? There are two readings we can use here, one positive and one negative. I will outline the positive now and the negative later. First, based on what follows, I'm going to assume that the one who the servants bow to are the greater good, or reason, or intelligence. I assume this because, although there is deception involved in the song, there is also the knowledge of this deception. Forces are therefore at work to uncover deception around us, to separate out the beauty that camouflages evil. Second, the phrase breaking the broken can mean one of two things: either a stacking of negative repression upon someone, for example, one's self-esteem is broken and another continues to heap abuse, or a negation of negation. For example, one's self-esteem is broken and another comes in to break the brokenness, that is, to fight fire with fire, so to speak. In other words, to tackle the issue by attacking it at its source. The first meaning is the most straightforward and typical, but the second, although unexpected, which itself can be a hint to the next song, makes more sense given the next 3 lines. We were set free. What is to be? When it's all said and done, what is left to really say? To be one turns to none, now we are just yesterday. How could one be set free if there was not a deeper force of good at work? Yet this freedom leaps ahead of itself, as it were, since it leads directly into its ambiguity and despair. What is to be? History has taken place, and so what is left to really say? Now we are just yesterday. There is something between defeatist and acceptance at the end of this chorus. Perhaps this signals the ambiguity of pure freedom. You speak in killing words, the kind that crush and kill. No mercy your pleasure to taste the blood you bled. The chase has ended in denial of glory, to trap and add to your servants' souls. There are indications here that suggest that we are dealing with the spirit crusher from the previous album, particularly with the line, the blood you bled, although that need not refer to a reflexive act like it was in the song The Spirit Crusher, but it could be an act performed upon another. There is also some failure suggested in the third line concerning the denial of glory, presumably of the active party, but then the final line suggests success, which could mean that it is indeed the spirit crusher, since that is a self-undermining force, and that its adding of servant souls is the continual entrenchment of that mindset into a habit and then a way of life. This forms the second negative reading of the song, and under this frame, the phrase breaking the broken really is straightforward. But then that leaves open the question how and why anyone would be set free in this scenario. Is it because they are thoroughly hollowed out by the spirit crusher, that there is nothing left to crush? The lyrics fall inconclusively on either side, which prompt our imaginations further. And when life seems to be complete, it comes and knocks us off our feet. The element of surprise, the avengeful attack, straight on your back it will send you, into a state of déjà vu. Here it comes one more time, showing its ugly face. The third song has, for most part, a fairly straightforward message. Life is full of strange and unexpected encounters, and even the best of plans is brought down by its enigma. Nevertheless, human beings are forward-looking creatures, both visually and temporally. Such mode of expectation also suggests a certain interpretation, and this leads me to think of Heidegger. Every interpretation Heidegger calls a forehaving, foresight, and foreconception. There is a Promethean ring to this, whose name means exactly foresight, and that further suggests a form of hypothesis. in the general scientific notion that you make claims or assertions about something and then collect proof and data to prove it. However, I do not think Heidegger means forehaving or foresight in quite the scientific way, but in a special ontological sense, since, as he writes in Being and Time, in ontological interpretation, an entity is to be laid bare with regard to its own state of being. Such an interpretation obliges us first to give a phenomenal characterization of the entity we have taken as our theme, and thus to bring it into the scope of our forehaving, with which all subsequent steps of our analysis are to conform. This laid bare with regard to its own state of being is key. I take this to mean that being lays itself bare, because when we perform a phenomenal characterization of Dasein, we are essentially performing a phenomenal characterization of ourselves, and therefore we pay attention to what I call plainly hidden features of being, in the manner it makes itself known to us. This phenomenological movement is at once something that must constitute our forescope, because it is a forehaving, since we already have some notion of what it is we are speaking of, albeit in an incomplete notion. Heidegger continues, but at the same time these steps need to be guided by whatever foresight is possible as to the kind of being which the entity may possess. Our forehaving and our foresight will then give us at the same time a sketch of that way of conceiving or foreconception, to the level of which all structures of being are to be raised. It is true that the foresight must conform with the possibilities that belong to that entity, Dasein. Now, turning finally to the song in question, life thwarts our expectations, but can the human being live without expectations, without foresight? Or are we simply doomed to fall to the machinations of expectations? The song proposes that one can prepare oneself in the cunning way of expecting the unexpected, thus living with the form of expectations, but also save yourself a state of shock. However, one might raise that there is a flattening of life quality here. That surprise is the spice of life, and that intermittent shocks are impulses to mental growth. And so we should not try to eliminate it. This all depends on the seriousness of the term shock. Perhaps if we are talking about it in terms of traumatic shocks, you essentially want to avoid those. The song ends on a few interesting lines. Strapped down to clarity, surprised no more. This idea of being strapped down to clarity evokes the image of being securely fastened on a roller coaster ride. It is because of safety that the terror the wild ride inspires turns to enjoyment rather than mental mutilation. Similar to how Kant speaks about lightning exciting awe and aesthetic experience precisely because we witness it from a standpoint of safety. So perhaps the message of this song is that in expecting the unexpected, we do not eliminate surprise altogether, but we get to enjoy our surprises rather than being petrified by them. And in so doing, perhaps we rise up to what Heidegger calls Dasein's authentic potentiality for being a whole. The fourth song is deeply speculative about the nature of time and how history can be used as a device to enlighten the present. The lyrics open with a scene of some characters standing on a mountain, preaching, revealing their wisdom, and one is reminded of the symbolism the mountain holds as a summit of wisdom, with examples like Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, Nietzsche's Zarathustra descending from the mountain, and Emily Dickinson's poem The Hallowing of Pain. Instead of focusing specifically on what is revealed by these figures, the song zooms out and sees the totality of which these figures are part of, namely that they stand on a mountain on the apex of the physical planet and take in all that the earth had to give them. This includes, it seems, what the earth also hides, and what secrets have been buried in the shadow of time. The word conceal is used, which suggests that it is as if the earth has willingly hidden away its secrets, and that this echoes Heraclitus' famous remark that nature loves to hide. However, the whole song is itself shrouded in another form of hiding, that of the hypothetical what if. What if, when they saw burning stars, they thought it was a gift from beyond far? Look close between the lines, beyond what you believe to be real. Are they just theories of time? The wise people on the summit treat the light of the heavens, the burning stars, as a gift. A gift from who and for what? The lyrics then bid us look closer at the lines. Which lines could this be? Suppose they are the lines formed between the stars, the patterns of the heavens. It makes sense then that the next line pushes us to look further beyond. Could it be that what we're looking at is more our own sense of time, and that this, as a theory, is the real gift, not the stars themselves that burn, but the burning temporality within? The perspective in the next verse shifts from the heavens to the earth, but maintains a view to the past. History becomes the site from which some live their lives, and certainly this is true in a great variety of ways. But the mention of the tooth at the start suggests that it is something hard-won. The song ends with a further speculation that through this hard-won reality of history, power became the standard of what could shatter dark with just a beam of light. But taking a close look at infinity, it may become the case that a greater power is at work that is not marred by the strife of time, but embodied through it. The fifth song is prescient about our contemporary digital world and its never-sleeping electronics. It begins, however, to speak in terms of utility, and initially every tool has something good about it, because it is useful, because it unlocks something of reality for us, or expedites our access. Even the humble plow takes away the seemingly absurd task of tilling the soil with our bare hands. This is perhaps a characteristic of tools, that they introduce a way of doing and being that now becomes the standard and renders the previous modes horribly outdated. But not all things follow a merely technic progression. as some things are of a nature that are not accessed through a mediation, but are experienced immediately. They are actual through themselves. Things go bad precisely in confusing one for the other, or thinking that one is reducible to the other. This is what I see in the song's opening lines. A tool to do good has gone bad. Electric altar for a new religion. A new way to link. A new way to think. Individual thoughts that have become missing. The song likens this tool to that of a religion, and a religion concerns itself with matters of ultimate value. But when a tool is likened to religion, or religion to a tool, that's when we have a confusion. The song, however, points to a more dire outcome, which is that individual thoughts have become missing. This is an important comment on thinking as such, since although thought is universal, and wherever thought has gone any thinker can come and follow, the thought in its totality is also singular and is embodied in a particular context, situation, or historical circumstance. The real thought is therefore individual. The song claims that individual real thoughts are missing in this new way of linking. But is that really true? As we make our way down the lyrics, the connection that is made between the link and the thought appears to be existential, and the matter becomes a question of survival. What will they do when the link they live becomes missing? Will they survive? We may see this as a satirical attack on people who get hooked on phones, on apps, on Instagram, and so forth. Will they now survive without it? But what exactly is supposed to survive here? A religion? A new way to think? In addition to this, there is the theme of reflection in this song as well as an evil reality. There is something paradoxical about looking into the mirror to ascertain the living truth, since the mirror exactly reflects a representation only visible to the viewer, and is much less objective than it might appear. How can this tool be good, or is this a form of double irony? And lastly, consider the contrast at the end of the song that speaks of a face of evil. Is this face a real face of somebody else, seen from the outside, or one's own face, seen in the mirror? What can a demon reality be but one that always is parasitic on another's existence? Even Descartes' demon had to posit an independent thinker for whom the evil illusion would appear, which would mean that a genuine external reality must exist, if it is just that of the thinker herself in this case, which dispels the demon reality altogether. Said in another way, the demon reality must be present for somebody, and that then means that it can never be more than a moment of something else, or we could say a certain corruption. The sixth song could almost be a word of encouragement, an imperative to stay one's course, yet it is not about believing in anything particular, but simply to believe. This could be similarly rendered as have faith or be hopeful. Do you believe what some might say can't be, could be reality? Let 7 be the one for me, 6 chapters of life laced with mystery, awaiting discovery. Reality is at stake in belief here, and contrary to common notions, belief here is not the barrier of mystery, but the gateway to discovery. I have no expertise with number mythology, but on the face of it, it seems that the last number is reserved for conception, that is, for me, which comes last, yet follows a range of other events or steps, which are laced with mystery. But this is not a mystery to venerate as mystery, but to discover what is at work in them. And the manner of discovery is pertinent. Immune you become, a war to be won, the soul of a voice. Let the voice of the soul be free. Here the self-determining voice of the soul returns, and it is emphasized that it must be free. Coupled with belief as discovery, we might surmise that discovery, actual discovery, involves freedom, and that genuine discovery is as much a self-discovery. Free to pursue one's own designs, values, systems, and projects. But surely this cannot be left at the individual level. If everyone pursues merely their own projects, then there is bound to be conflict. That may well be, but the issue of the song here is not that, because for that to become a problem, there still has to be a fundamental initiative taken by the individual, and taking the first step is all the world right now. For most it does not come easily. For some it comes with pain. From a thought to a living sight. For some it's a life. For some a game. What the song is after here is clearly a project of self-realization, and concerns as much as that of creating art, to building a program, to putting together a business. These are all thoughts that have to become a living sight. But before that, it was just simply a sight. You see it, you are certain of it, and this certainty puts you into action. It is interesting that the last line here indicates that this may be something strenuously serious or a form of playful work, suggesting that ultimately it does not matter what you, the creator, feels. It is the work that must be accomplished, and it will be what it will be, regardless of whether you do it as toil or as play. So perhaps we should take play then. Whatever the path, the beginning and end is that you must believe. The song ends with bittersweet lines. If I was paid for disappointments, I would be a wealthy man. The magic lives in sincerity, in truth, behind the thoughts I choose to stand, awaiting discovery. One is not paid for disappointments, but in the appointments made in one's life. Here is the wealth of spirit and the lifeblood of sincerity and truth, something behind which one can stand in the first place. The magic is exactly in the encounter, and you must believe in order to be there, to get behind your thoughts in the reality their actions unfold, and the reality they will unfold. Belief reinforces itself. Tony Robbins lays out this pattern of belief, action, result, and reinforcement. If you believe you have little potential, what kind of action is going to come out of that but something limited? Limited action yields limited results, and limited result reinforces the belief that you have little potential. Belief must, as Schiller's cup, be foaming forth an excess of infinity. The seventh song appears to pay homage to an old traditional American song, God Almighty is Gonna Cut You Down, which Johnny Cash has also made his own version of. Like this old song, the song Cut Down appears in general to be a warning to evildoers that they cannot avoid God's judgment. Yet, Cut Down focuses on the subjective perspective of the evildoer. Please tell me how you escape from the guilt that should eat at your mind. When you lay down to sleep, so many precious lives lost, picking up the shattered dreams broken by you. And then this is followed up by how, no matter the path, the result will be the final judgment. But an interesting section of the song is what follows next, which has a Job-like moment of despair at why life must be, quote, a game we are forced to play, end of quote. The song does not linger at this moment, however, as this is next clothed by a pragmatic retreat to always balance your wins and losses. Scott Galloway has discussed in an interview about moments when he is at his high, feeling like he is at the top of the world, but he knows that it is never as good as it seems, and that, likewise, whenever he is feeling low, in despair, that he also tells himself that things are never as bad as we make them out to be. But what does this kind of reflection do to our experience? Can we never trust ourselves to be fully in the moment, whether it is good or bad? Must we always, as it were, cut ourselves down? Perhaps the real culprit is revealed at the end, and it may not be your usual evildoer, but the mindset that bore such an actor. No guilt, no shame. Once again, empty words are to blame. The final song of the album gets to the heart of the matter. It opens with a meditation on temporality, comprehension, and healing. Same place, different time, same chase, a different line. A chance to heal, to allow what is real, to take its course. As the TV show Dark brings out exceptionally well, identity and difference need not run along the same parallel lines. Indeed, one can comprehend a pattern to be the same even if the time is different. that the same movement occurs in different personages, places, or contexts. Identity and difference are thus mixed together in comprehension, and it is this comprehension in temporality that provides a chance to heal by allowing reality its freedom. And this reality is creative by nature, as the next verse tells us. Like a brush in hand, to paint a picture of what we would like to see and love to be. The vision is clear, taking charge of fear. Actuality leaps ahead into possibility by fashioning an image of what it likes to see. The image is effective immediately because we desire it, but because of this desire that exists, the image also has a moment of actuality already taken root, namely in us, and the capacity of our idea of the image. Driven by this, the vision is made clear, and that clarity gives us the strength to handle fear. Notice how the elements from the Perseverance album are pertinent here, as well as elements from this album. This idea of clear vision harkens back to the songs Believe and A Moment of Clarity, and taking charge of matters signals the song The Flesh and the Power It Holds. What we see here is that the progress itself has a twofold idea, or is a twofold idea. At once striving towards a better circumstance, as well as realizing itself in part by steps already taken, namely the vision being clear, the living desire to change. This idea is portrayed wonderfully by Georges Bataille when he writes, "Entirety exists within me as exuberance in empty longing in the desire to burn with desire." Actuality hungers for possibility, and possibility thirsts for actuality. The two by themselves are either incomplete, stale, or contradictory. Together they propel each other into a life beyond life. But we cannot take this life for granted. For granted I do not take the future to be changed by triumph. Tears and pain of the past, I gain wisdom. The momentum keeps us going, but both how this verse is written and how it is sung makes it tricky to figure out the meaning. The meaning of the first two lines is that triumph alone does not change the future, which can further mean that it is not achieving purposes or goals that is the real engine of change. The next two lines appear fragmented, but their meaning is that nothing is necessarily lost in the past, as negative events and memories can be transmuted into a more rational orientation of life. The fragile art of existence is kept alive by sheer persistence. The fragile art of existence. Existence is classed as art, which is itself something radical. Philosophers traditionally keep aesthetics and art out of the domain of ontology, that is, the discipline that thinks about being in existence. However, most philosophers think that existence is not static, or merely something that is out there by itself. Movement, change, alteration, development, or the illusion thereof have to be accounted for somehow. Is the world just the way it always has been, fundamentally speaking? Or does the world itself develop and change? But then how does this world not become swallowed up in this sea of change? This logic of change and identity is put together into the idea of a self-moving or self-organizing being, one that is capable of adapting while also maintaining something of its own in this very change. What sort of being can fulfill such a structure is widely debated. Either God, the world itself, or the subject, or even life, are said to be capable of it. But in this taking on of adaptation, becoming other, and yet retaining its identity through it, could we not call this a primordial form of art? Perhaps what artists aspire to emulate is this existential art in their particular aesthetic arts, and is not what philosophers attempt to think logically precisely this existential art. In addition to existence itself being a form of primordial art, there is fragility to this art such that it must be continually sustained, and it is here the element of perseverance comes right back to the forefront. The album The Sound of Perseverance, discussed in part 1, elaborates this element of persistence and its trails, but the title of that album suggests the native realm of persistence is not music, but sound. Even though, of course, the album is music, lyrics and structure and so on, these are, however, not its theme. Put differently, the Perseverance album does not make its art as art explicit, but attempts to manifest the matter of art. The Fragile Art of Existence album, in turn, attempts to emphasize the form of art, the organizational structure, the orientation and movement of this art. The two albums in this way appear to mimic the classical philosophical distinction of matter and form. One emphasizes the sound, the other the music. One the existence, the other the art. But at the end of the second album, here in its title track, we return to persistence from art, or we return to the matter from the form. And in doing so, we see that matter is really already form, and that what art confronts in existence is just art again, but at a distance, at a step down, at a different line, or a different time. Hence, we now acknowledge the art of existence. If existence is here an implicit form of art, it has essentially the same movement and thought put into it as the explicit form of art, and that what sustains the implicit is the same as what keeps the explicit going, namely sheer persistence. We therefore nowhere have art that is without existence, or form that is without matter. Said otherwise, pure art does not exist. Art exists as art insofar as it is embodied, formed of matter, or made up of itself in an implicit form. Here we see that both poles of the difference between art and existence are each united through the other. Both are form and both are matter. But this second unity, which is actually the fundamental unity upon reflection, is the fragile one. It is kept alive through persistence. But if this fundamental unity is really not doubled in art and existence, as each being the unity of the other, should we not in reality have two forms or movements of persistence here? I think this is so, and to use an example, we can point to learning a new skill. Something of what was learned previously is retained and is made ready to be picked up again, to be further developed. For example, yesterday one learned a new chord on the guitar. It required a lot of conscious concentration and awkward turning of the hand to perform, but in doing it again today, it becomes a little easier. The art of the skill becomes ready. It persists, but only implicitly. If, for some reason, one does not make the time to practice again, this implicit persistence begins to fade away. It may attempt to move us, to act as a driver, but new skills are as easily picked up as they are dropped, precisely because their element of persistence has grown strong enough, or there is a lack of it. More persistence, as it were, needs to be poured into it, and this is the moment of fragility. However much one practices a skill, it is never a guarantee that one will do it again next time. Habits are not a necessity. But this fragility is for that reason exactly the moment of freedom, to choose once more to develop this skill, to develop oneself, to project oneself into existence, or to leave it for another. But another must take its place. If another does not take its place, we fall prey to the futureless nihilism of this story, and we become trapped in what is a perversion of this artful existence, namely self-pity. No time for self-pity. No time for dwelling on what should have been, but is yet to be. Self-pity is perhaps the most devious of emotions, in that it is the hardest to become conscious of. It masks itself as a critique on problems which appear to be external, problems of the world, of sorry circumstances and misfortune, and appends these to a charter of justification for one's own present state. Why am I not better, wealthier, healthier, smarter, kinder, happier? Well, that is because of my debt, my poor upbringing, my devotion to a cause, my responsibilities, and so forth. While some such reasons may be true, are any of them a reason to stifle your progress? And I mean not progress in the abstract, dwelling on what should have been. That is precisely the flaw in this thinking, but of where you are now, and from where you can go precisely from here. If the current moment is just taken up, you cannot but make progress. And this cheers you on, even though, of course, you have yet to achieve the goal you just set yourself. But this, I think, is the magic of progress, namely that you cannot but achieve something in initiating it as well as not achieving something, giving you both actuality and possibility in one. And, moreover, the genuine progress of life is not achieving goals or actualizing possibilities, but building systems. Ancient monastic traditions across the globe have intuited this well, and that is why so much effort is devoted to ritual, schedule, prayer, and practice. Giving into self-pity is really to cut oneself down, linking here back to the 7th song of the album. And it is self-pity which gives flight to envy, possibly the most dangerous of the classical sins. The investor Charlie Munger often talks about envy as the driver of evil, since we may be perfectly fine with ourselves until we see our neighbor having twice as much as we, and suddenly we have half of what we thought was good enough. Truly, it is the sin of reflection. But I think if self-pity is rooted out, there is no air for envy to breathe, since we do not dwell on what should have been. And here another detail becomes apparent. Envy, like self-pity, in the frame I have just presented them, both operate on looking at the present through the lens of the past. Envy cries, I should match my neighbor, if not do better. Why do I not have as much, or have a life as happy, etc.? And one stops to dwell on what should be here. This charming siren song paralyzing any productive action. Tony Robbins talks about putting the leverage on yourself, not having others put it on you, or that you have to put it on them, expecting their change will do your change for you. When the walls, as he puts it, of the present, past, and future close in, that is when you move forward. But that is a painful, if not traumatic, option. We should not have to suffer terrible mistakes in order to follow a more rational life. Can we not move forward by better means? The second verse may suggest just this. Take the plunge, take the chance, safe in heart and soul from elements, spawned by those void of no self-worth and no sense of dreams. Here the syntax can quickly suggest that there is a double negation in the third line, which appears self-undermining, but I think we should read this as spawned by those who are void, comma, who have no self-worth, comma, and have no sense of dreams. The prescription the song puts forward then is simply to throw yourself in your project. Take your chance, believe positively in it and your ability to do it, and shield yourself, this core of you that wants something in life, from the elements that would deprive it of its artful perseverance, and that would turn you into a phantom that has no dignity and no sense of the meaning of dreams. Part 1 of this essay discussed this parasitic being as the spirit crusher, and there we saw that only spirit can crush spirit. Now, there may be a usefulness to envy, the same way uncertainty can be a spice to an otherwise secure and certain life, but only insofar as it immediately can return us to our own determination, rather than goading us on to an exiled path where our power is used against us. What decides whether spirit is crushed by itself cannot be an exact science or fated providence, but an art, a terribly fragile art, which lives from one moment to the next simply through the beating heart of perseverance. I asked the question at the beginning of this essay about the mystery of creation, which was cast in terms of sound and music, or how good it makes us feel. The question really is if creation is bringing out a pattern that is already there, or if something utterly novel just spawns into existence. As we have seen the fragile art of existence lay it out, existence is itself already an art, or that the matter already contains form, and that what becomes the explicit art, the artistic movement we simply find ourselves already in, is as much fulfilling what is latent in bringing it to light and letting that light be reflected in one of its colors. In this way, we do not resolve the difference, but embrace it. The difference of matter and form is, after all, a difference not of matter, but of form. And when we hear great music, form thus returns to itself. Remembering is the act of form in matter. We put forth art in existence, only to turn around and look at its face. Matter, in turn, in its singular role, is the element of unity between the two. Though our feelings and emotions of great music and other aesthetic experiences are electrified with form so as to be intelligible, it is matter that closes the circuit. The feelings are the projection of our own flesh and the power it holds, singularly consummate in the moment.